Welcome to Psych Sessions Late Career. I'm your host, Dave Kreiner. What does late career mean anyway? It can include people who are well into their careers, people who are thinking about retirement, people who are retired but still working, or maybe retired and doing other things. We have conversations with people in all these life situations. If you consider yourself late career, however you happen to define it, or you plan on being a late career person in the future, this podcast is for you. Welcome to Psych Sessions Late Career. I'm your host, Dave Kreiner. I'm here today with Dana Dunn of Moravian University and Jane Halonen, who is at the University of West Florida. Thank you both for joining me for this chat about late career issues, whatever that might mean. Thanks for being here.
I'm hoping it's fun and that it won't be dour.
I think we can make it that way, Jane. Let's make it a goal that will make it fun and not dour.
Not funereal.
If you don't mind, let me start by asking each of you just to say whatever you'd like to share about what you're doing now at this point in your career, where you feel you are in your career, and what kind of activities you're doing. Okay. Dana, would you like to start?
Oh, let Jane start.
Okay, Jane will start.
I consider myself late career because much of what I do is fend off the question, aren't you retired yet? I'm 74. And by all rights, I could easily retire, but it's hard to walk away from something that is as much fun as what I do. I'm in the classroom full time. I teach 3 classes. I mostly teach capstone courses that are focused on special topics like pseudoscience or history. This year, the dean fast-talked me into running the counseling program on an interim measure because we had a late retirement, and I think we've got the replacement. But it was interesting being shoved into an administrative role after being out of that scene for 10 years. I also advise psychi, and I play pickleball.
That seems like a pretty full plate of things to be involved in, Jane.
It's pretty full, yeah.
Well,
Dana, go ahead, Dana.
I don't play pickleball, so but you probably could have guessed that. But anyway, so I consider myself sort of on target career. I mean, I guess technically I'll be late soon, but I'm turning 65 in May, which is somewhat forbidding, and my mailbox is filled up with Medicare this and Medicare that, and I had to fend off my local insurance guy who wanted to have a meaningful heart-to-heart to discuss Medicare with me recently. I said, I'm not retiring yet. So at this point, I'm thinking at least 2 more years, maybe 3. I don't know. I mean, like Jane, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm also probably as busy or even busier than I usually am. I have had a lot of projects come to me. Jane won't remember this, but she once said, the work just comes to you, doesn't it? And she's right. But, I'm winding up the end of this year. I'll finish 6 years as editor of Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Psychology, and someone else will take the helm. And I wrote a book. I had sabbatical last spring, and I wrote a book on disability-related work that's going to come out from Oxford, I hope in the fall. We'll see what the timeline is. And I have 2 other editing projects, and then I have what I'm calling my salon project for probably the last book I'll do. We'll see. But
that's a nice teaser, Dana.
Well, it's very quickly. My best friend is a retired lawyer who was trained as an architect, and there's a Frank Lloyd Wright house that has never been written about. And I'm interested in doing it because it's probably one of the first examples of universal design. Wright designed the house for a Korean War vet who had spinal surgery and became paralyzed. And it's quite an elegant house, and no one's written a book on it. So the architect can handle the heavy lifting, and I can do everything else. So anyway, I'm hoping we get to do that.
That sounds fantastic.
Well, it's more complicated because I've been trying to find a publisher and haven't had any luck yet. And I don't really want to self-publish it, but we may end up doing that. We'll see. But anyway, so I'm very busy and enjoying my classes. And, I was sort of surprised. I'm turning 65. So I never expected this would happen. So I guess it is. So, I'm good.
So both of you clearly have a full slate of activities and are keeping, it sounds like, as busy as ever, maybe busier in some ways. How do you go about deciding at this point in your career what to do and what not to do? What kind of factors go into those decisions you make about how you want to spend your time?
That's a really great question because it's changed over time. I think in the beginning of my career, I would say yes to everything because that just seemed like a survival thing to do. And now I'm very picky about who else is working on the project. Is this something where I'll be doing most of the heavy lifting, in which case that's going to be less interesting to me? Is it something where I'm going to have an opportunity to work with some new people? That's always attractive. I think I'm more selective now and only do the kind of work that sparks joy. I'll borrow that kind of lame phrase. And especially when I've had successful projects with people, students or faculty, then I try to reproduce that. It's one of the reasons Dana and I have been in a writing partnership for I don't know how many years now.
Since we met, really.
Yeah. But one of our favorite joint projects that is part of our mutual plate is that we occasionally write advice columns for the Chronicle of Higher Education. And the way that works is one of us gets a bug up the butt about something, and we run it past the other and say, "Ooh, would this be a good idea?" And then the other person always says, "Oh yeah, you write the first draft." And then we exchange drafts and send it off. And depending on how long our editor plays with it, it usually turns into an interesting column that generates a little fan mail for us, which is really fun at this stage of the game.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's been, Jane is a joy to work with and completely dependable. And, we just... I'm always amazed because she'll say, "All right, I'll take the first draft." And like 3 hours later, there it is. I mean, it's just there. And that's really nice. And, I enjoy doing that too. And, but in terms of other stuff, sometimes I can't say no. Right. So the two editing projects I'm doing, one is a handbook I did several years back in 2015, and they wanted a second edition. I sort of had to say yes, but I recruited a co-editor with me, and Aaron Richmond, who is a machine and really an amazing line editor. I hate him anyway. He's so good, but no, he's really amazing. And then another is a smaller book I did on positive psychology. An edited book, and the publisher came back to me and said, "Can you have some of the original authors come back and then add some new ones?" So I'm doing that right now. And these are enjoyable projects. The hard part is getting people to agree, and then once you do that, it's not it's like a year's worth of work, but just editing. So, but that's good. But in terms of I don't want to sound like a workaholic,
But you are, Dana.
Yeah, but I take my summers seriously. I work in the morning and then I hang out at the pool all afternoon. And I've been doing a lot of gardening like Jane, and not I would dare say I'm more of an idea person in the garden than I am than I am like Jane out there hacking things away and growing new things. But I do a lot of potted plants and planting things. And when a tree has to be put in, I get someone to do it. But anyway, but I enjoy that a lot. I mean, that's really been a pleasure. And in fact, I spend a lot of time in the winter reading gardening books because I can't wait till the back garden looks like it is supposed to look again in the spring.
I wonder if we can and maybe should make a distinction here between being a workaholic and just being very productive. And I'm perceiving, I think for both of you, but particularly for how you just described what you do, Dana, it doesn't sound to me like a workaholic. It sounds to me like somebody who's got a good amount of balance, but you're just extremely productive. Well, I don't think it's the same thing.
I'm trying for more balance. But, well, how long have we been at this? I've been at Moravian 38 years now. And, there are, I guess we could call them economies of scale in work. Like you figure out, I know approximately how long it's going to take me to do something. And I'm often surprised when it takes me less time than I estimated to. I guess that's the planning fallacy, as Kahneman called it. So, except in reverse. But I'm happier than I've ever been there. I mean, I'm delighted with my life. And
well, you're implying that workaholics aren't happy. I think you're a happy workaholic.
Yeah. Okay.
I think for me, that judgment is that you are continuously in motion. I don't think I've ever seen you relaxed gardening. So I've only seen you as this incredible verbal machine.
Oh, well.
That always has a project.
Well, I sit in the back garden. After I get home from the pool, I sit in the back garden for a couple hours. I do. And I don't read psychology. None. I think, I've ordered my days so that I don't do work after 3:30 all year round. I mean, I just discovered.
Okay, well, I take it back then.
I just discovered that, if I have to, I like to prefer meetings then, but I discovered that whenever I do something that late in the day, the quality is not as good. So I like to do grading in the morning. I like to do writing in the morning, and if I have to do it in the afternoon, I'll do it. But I really try not to. But
I've found I have a similar pattern to that, Dana. Although, of course, I'm nowhere near as productive as you are, but I find that the hours during the day when I am more productive for me are early in the day, and that seems to be shifting earlier and earlier, as well as that sort of band of time constricts. So, when it gets into late afternoon or early evening, I can potentially check my email or something, but I just am aware that it's sort of pointless for me to take on something that's going to be cognitively taxing because I'm not going to do a good job and just have to clean it up later.
Right. I like Jane, I'm teaching 3 classes a semester, and I stack them all on Monday, Wednesday, which is a little crazy because for uninteresting reasons, scheduling is more complicated than it used to be. And I teach a 7:30 in the morning in the fall, and I'm teaching one now in the spring. The fall is not so bad. I got to tell you, the winter 7:30 in the morning is difficult. I mean, I do it, but that means I'm up at 5. And then I have this semester, so that goes from 7:30 to 8:40. Then I have a 9 o'clock to 10:10, and then a break. And then I have a noon class. And then I'm wiped out because I've been up for 8 hours. And then, I do some other stuff, of course, but I don't do anything taxing, because it isn't worth it.
I wish I could have a 7:30 in the morning class because I have the same kind of pattern. But I sometimes have trouble getting students to come even to my 8 o'clock class.
Oh, it's really kind of unfair. The class is a 100 level human adjustment class, and I love teaching it, but it's aimed at first year students, and they're kind of a captive audience, and they like the class once they're in it, but I got to tell you, I have to take attendance every day. And, we've had a lot of snow here in Pennsylvania. We haven't had much snow in years. And we've had I don't mean amounts of snow, but snow lingering and ice and freezing rain. And it's brutal. I mean, the students, even coming from the dorm, which, and, my campus is so small, it's not a big walk, but, they don't want to do it. And there I am trying to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
I think another challenge about this kind of chronometry is, as Dave points out, you wake up earlier and earlier. And I do my very best work as soon as my eyes pop open. I start problem solving. So I'll often pop onto the computer and send email out at 3 a.m. And then I forget that people actually pay attention to when things arrive. And then I take a lot of crap from people about, like, what were you doing up so early? It's like, well, that's when I do my best work. So get off my back.
Yeah, well, I can't claim that. I can't claim that I'm of any use till 7:30, but
sometimes you have to do the schedule send to avoid that. Do you ever do that, Jane?
The schedule.
You write up the email and then you schedule it to be delivered at a more reasonable hour so that you don't get those questions about why you were up at 3 a.m.
I don't think about doing that. I just crank the work out.
Right.
And so when I'm done with the email, I want it off my desktop and off my thinking. And I just I'm sort of superstitious. It's like, if I schedule it for later, will I schedule it at the right? Just send it. Send it.
Well, one thing
people mind their own business.
One thing I've been thinking about, though, is I don't know that I want to do any more sort of governance things. I mean, I think I've benefited from those experiences, most of them, and enjoyed them. And, but I think it's also fair to step aside and let younger people, do those things. And, but I've been thinking about that because I just rotated off a committee at APA, and I don't think I want to. I mean, never say never, I suppose, but I don't think I have any interest in doing another one. That it is a big commitment.
Well, I wonder if that is an example maybe of what you were talking about earlier, Jane, when I asked what factors go into your deciding what to take on. And you said, Jane, that had changed. Mm-hmm. Does that kind of ring true for you in terms of like choosing to serve on a committee or not, and thinking, well, early in my career, at least for me, I can say early in my career, I would have said, I'm not going to turn down an opportunity because maybe it'll help me. But now I might think more carefully about, is this something where it makes sense for me to be on it as opposed to some other faculty member who could do it? What do you think, Jane?
Yeah, I think that captures well kind of the life transition. At this point, I'm fairly certain that Guidelines 3.0 will be my last hurrah with APA. And it's not that I did enjoy the process of Guidelines 3.0, but I'm very conscientiously attentive to the fact that as long as I'm yapping, it takes up space that younger people could do, and younger people who need that kind of seasoning and maybe that kind of resume building. And I don't need that anymore. I don't care about that stuff anymore. I've a couple times later in my career, I've made a choice not to do an APA invitation, and then suffered while whatever it is going on. It's like, oh, I wish I could be doing that, but then remind myself, evolution means time to step aside.
Yeah.
Something similar with AP reading. As much as I loved AP reading, once I was the chief reader and I stepped down from that, people were saying, well, come and be a reader. It's like, no, I think the normal sequence of behavior is that once you've done the management of it, it's a little bit hard to go back to the table to do reading. And besides, you shouldn't take up that space. That should go to someone who will benefit from it as much as I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I sure get pangs, though, when I see posts about the reading every summer.
Well, and some people like Susie Baker still goes and she loves it. And, and Jamie McMinn still goes and he says, why don't you do it? I'm like, I can't. And I really can't. I can't fit in that much time anymore. So there are other things I want to do. So anyway, and that's not a complaint. That's just as you said, we have evolved to a different thing now, where we're doing other things.
I think it's kind of in keeping with the Ericksonian cycle as well, that at this stage of things, I get a lot more pleasure out of brokering opportunities for other people, that it's really fun for me, whether I'm working with people at my university or whether I'm working with people through STP, to be able to go, oh, you like that? I know of this opportunity that you might want to pursue, or have you talked with this publisher about that? I think they would be interested in it. That's just, I've always been sort of a busybody that way, but I find that especially reinforcing at this stage.
So while we're talking about these examples of different things both of you have been involved in over the course of your career, I would like to ask you each to reflect back on what you've done over your career. And both of you have been, as we've talked about, been teachers of psychology for quite a long time. Both of you have quite a bit of administrative experience. Both of you have contributed in terms of professional service a lot. The question that I have for you is, looking back, what are some of the things that are most rewarding to you about your career? It's hard to pick, isn't it?
It is.
There's so many things.
It is. I think for me, and I don't want to appear like I'm pandering, but my association through STP/APA has been so powerful.
Arno, stop. Arno! Arno!
Arno is misbehaving.
All right. So Arno apparently didn't like what it was I was saying.
He had to do an area.
Yeah. But to finish, the relationships that I've developed through that have been so nourishing to me. From the moment I sat down next to Maureen Hester at my first APA, and then got introduced to Randy Smith, and then watching the circle of influence grow, the number of people that I network with, leads to new and different kinds of projects. And I can't say that there's any one in particular that is the most important, but I would highlight that one that had pretty long-reaching effects for me was the P3 project at APA, where I met Dana and had an opportunity to work with Rob McIntyre and Maureen McCarthy and a whole bunch of other, Kristen Whitlock, amazing people who were technically they were the outcasts of everyone who had applied to the invitational conference. They didn't want to work on assessment, but we talked them into it. I was part of the steering committee, so I did part of that talking people into it. And then it turned out that this group they were magical. So much so that we call ourselves the Assessment All-Stars. I still have a little keychain that says All-Stars that commemorates that particular event on my car keys. That's led to books. It led to the founding of the ACT, back when it was the best practice conference that grew out of the Assessment All-Stars. And so just in terms of sheer magnitude, that would probably be one of the most important for me.
That's great. Dana?
I would say virtually the same thing. And I would add to it, though, that, I've said this in several venues, but, I think all the divisions in APA, each one has its own sort of face. And some are more welcoming than others. And I think some are, anyway, I'm not going to say it, but I mean, when I met, when I hadn't done much with APA before P3, and, when I met so many wonderful people there and they became friends, and then I started getting more involved, and I mean, it just took off. And, I have enjoyed so many productive relationships and friendships over the years, with all the different types of things I've done with these people. And I'm sort of surprised, at how much we accomplished. And, I think, with relatively few skirmishes. I mean, that's the other thing that's kind of amazing. I mean, I think about, and the other division I'm involved with is Division 22, which is rehabilitation psychology. And they're a wonderful group of people. They're, obviously with different interests than STP, but they leave their egos at the door for the most part, just like we do. And I'm a social psychologist by training, and I have never felt, the few social meetings I've gone to, I've always found it to be incredibly dull. And because it's all about fame and glory. And, I mean, there's a place for that, but I think as one ages, one gets tired of it, so, but that's the thing, the friendships. And I never thought that I would have that many or as many as I do. And maybe you feel the same way. I mean, it's quite amazing. And I think, and it's odd when some of these people have retired now, because, we're still in the fray. But I think when Barney Bines said to me, I guess it was like a year ago, he said, you know what, I'm completely pulling back. I don't want to do anything anymore. And I don't want to do any more reviews. And I was surprised, because I thought he might continue. And Randy Smith has done the same thing. And that's not a complaint. I think that's just that they've decided they have other interests now. And
and that's my cohort you're talking about, the people that I grew up in STP with. And I believe I'm the last person standing out of that group. So it certainly reminds me. They tell me that when the time comes, I'll know. And I have to admit, I've been feeling a little more inkling toward retirement in the last couple of years. I don't see myself lecturing and dying at the podium and being carried out. Like I'm talking to some people on campus visits when I'm doing academic program reviews, and you get that 90-year-old professor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna die at the podium. Well, I don't want to die at the podium. I want to make sure that my brain is intact, that I'm still feeling pretty good. But I think conditions are changing in higher ed, and especially changing in Florida.
Yeah.
So those kinds of, when events happen that are political and not to my liking, I think I'm so glad I'm close to retirement, because I can walk and other people are stuck.
Yeah. I mean, I would echo that. I think one of the things that, Jane said earlier that, we do these advice columns when we get annoyed, and very often, and the number of rules that now exist at my institution, and hoop jumping and filing this and completing that. I mean, as much as I like the place, I just sometimes and I don't know whether this is just me being a curmudgeon, or whether it's just, maybe it is more of a demand, but it's things that I used to be able to do with a phone call or an email. No, I have to fill out I had someone say to me yesterday, I'm teaching a critical thinking class in the fall. And it's called critical thinking. And it's a committee member from a committee that approves even special topics courses. We used to be able just to offer a special topics course without approval for 3 times. And then we had to add it to the curriculum or not teach it again. Anyway, this person who was being kind and genuine wrote me, and he said, "We don't think that's a good name, critical thinking. We think you should call it like critical assessment of information in psychology." And I wrote back and said, no, like that's what these courses are called. Like, I'm not doing that. And I just thought, okay, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to defend the truth?
Well, and I think that encroachment on being the best self you can be as a teacher, that at least in the last year, I found just multiple things going on that would get in the way of me doing my best work. I would like, all right, the Teaching and Learning Center. Now you have to fill out a JIRA ticket instead of just call to say, how do I fix this problem on Canvas? Well, that's not teacher friendly. Just the sheer number of hoops one has to jump through to get things done, it's multiplied significantly. And I know when I listen in department meetings about, here's the chair's report about what they're putting up with, which is so much worse than when I was an administrator. I can't imagine people thriving in an environment that weights them down with so much university protection is, I guess, the phrase I would use.
Yeah. I mean, I was department chair. I started being department chair again in 2018, and I finished not this December, but December a year ago. And I got to tell you, my good friend Stacey Zaremba has taken over, and she's doing a magnificent job, much better than I was doing. But it is the amount of work is exponentially more than it used to be, and the number of meetings one must attend, and these are mandatory. Because you're chair, you have to do this, and I'm glad I'm out. I'm not. I'm director of academic assessment, which I'll keep for a while, but but that's manageable in comparison. I mean, being a frontline department chair, forget about it. I mean, it's not what it. I don't know that it was ever a glorious job. Maybe it was, but it's.
I used to think being chair was a great job. I loved being chair, but that wasn't in this era. This era would drive me crazy.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to dump too much on our students, but the fragility and the issues that we never used to have to deal with are now everybody does. I mean, and I understand we're still the COVID is working its way through the system in a different way, but some days I just don't know what to do, sometimes the questions I'm asked by students are completely unreasonable, or the accommodations they want. I don't mean technical accommodations. I mean, I'm a child of the universe. Please let me do this. And it's like, no, I can't. I have to be fair to the other 29 children of the universe in the class.
I would comment the emergence of, I'm having a mental health day as an excuse for why I can't meet the obligation that you've set forth as a teacher. I'm finding that a little challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, I don't want to become an unkind person.
You don't want to become a bastard?
Well, I'm already a bastard, but I don't want to become an unkind person, but, or be thought of that way. And I know that's a risk, because sometimes my verbal reflex is quick.
I feel like as senior people, I'll put it that way. I don't mean in terms of age, but I mean in terms of our careers. I feel like we have earned the privilege that we can be a little cantankerous about these things, which in all seriousness is not something that some of our junior colleagues will feel comfortable doing, because they have to be concerned about things like, how are they going to be evaluated and what's going to happen when they go up for whatever type of promotion process they have. Do you feel that way, that you feel maybe a little bit freer to say, well, this doesn't really make sense. Why are we doing this? I don't want to do that.
Yeah. But one of the things I've noticed is, I guess I can say this. I've become frustrated by some of the junior colleagues, not in my department, but some junior colleagues in other parts of the campus who clearly want to kill the father. That is, they look at me like I'm dead wood, and they're not interested in, what I know about the institution or why something was designed to work the way it does. Some of the comments or questions or things they've asked for have been outrageous, and I just and I'm not suggesting that, I am not someone who looks back nostalgically, on my salad days. I don't do that. But I am sort of frustrated by some of the, well, we've hired some people and then they leave because they want the sun, the moon, and the stars,
Mhm.
and right now, higher ed is not in the business of giving out the sun, the moon, and the stars. I mean, it's just not, that's not the way it is.
Well, you have to fill out a form to get the sun and the moon and the stars, and then it has to go through several committees.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, again, I think part of this is, I don't want to say unique, but part of this is relevant to my campus because we've had so many structural changes. And
I would answer about the curmudgeon piece. I do feel not as constrained. I get my student evaluations and they're fine, but they're not compelling. I don't live and die with my evaluations like my colleagues do. My evaluations are pretty good. That might be part of what makes that easy, but it's just not a traumatic event.
Right.
And I am referred to as the badass grandmother of the department. And I believe that represents the fact that I can be kind of cantankerous. I'm well known for really getting on students for unprofessional language. Like if they talk to me like they can't get out the sentence without saying 1,000 times, that I'm going to say, listen, let's talk about, we need to teach code switching, that you're talking to a professional. I want you to talk thoughtfully. Think about what you're going to say before you wind up that sentence. And I'll just ask students to start over again. So I think that establishes that reputation. But I did get a scary moment this past semester when a student at the end of my social psychology class, and I did post this on Facebook because it was too funny, said, I have a surprise for you. I have a PowerPoint about you that I want to show the class. It's like, oh, okay. And so happens I'd invited guests to come because we'd had some special things going on in the class and I wanted everybody to be part of the end of it. But the opening slide was things my badass grandmother professor has said this semester. And some of the things that I said out of context made me sound like I was schizophrenic. I showed it to my husband and said, did you really say this stuff? And the fact is I did. And I know the context, that the context was not part of the slideshow, but because I can be a little bit raunchy, apparently, and I make jokes that students don't expect from a 75, 74-year-old person. This person had just done a compendium of all those things that were a little bit shocking, a little titillating. And honestly, it was funny as hell. I laughed my ass off. People asked if I would post it. And I said, no, because good taste and job security prevent me from sharing what I just sat through. But I think it captures the essence of your question, which is I'm a lot freer while I don't drop an F-bomb in class. I may swear to get a point across and not give it a second thought. And earlier in my career, I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also, again, depending on the class, but I push students a bit. And I mean, most of my classes are, discussion based. I mean, I still don't do PowerPoints, I must confess. And so I'll write stuff on the board occasionally, but we'll have a discussion. There'll be a text that they read for the class, and then we'll talk about it. And sometimes we go down rabbit holes, and other times we just talk about whatever the main points are. But I will come back to a student and say, well, why do you think that's true? And they'll just look at me like, what do you mean? And I'll say, well, you need to explain it. And they're often not used to that. And so sometimes they think, or if I'll make a joke about what they say, it's not meant to be a hurtful joke, but it's meant to get them to think. And so sometimes in my course evaluations, and like Jane, I mean, again, I don't live and die by them, but sometimes the student will say, Dr. Dunn can be condescending. okay, I'm not trying to be condescending. I'm trying to get you to think, right? When I teach personality, for example, everyone thinks they're unique. And what I say is, you're not unique. Look around the room. Come on. But in any case, I think, eventually the students get it, but not all of them. Mm-hmm. And more's the pity. I try, but I think I'm pretty good at what I do.
That does remind me of another challenge that we face as we age in the discipline, which is how current our examples are. And increasingly, I find myself saying, I'll make a reference and I'll look at the class and say, does anyone know what I'm talking about? And they'll just have blank stares. The last one was, I caught a cold and I had a very sultry voice. So I said, I apologize. I'm sounding like Lauren Bacall. No. Looked at me and I said, Lauren Bacall? Nobody? Crickets? Okay. This is an actress from the 40s who had a very low, sexy voice. Kind of loses the whole point, right? So
right.
You have to kind of now watch and throw out the things that bomb with Gen Zers, and a lot of things bomb.
The other day, I was trying to illustrate a point, and I usually don't refer to movies because I'm not I don't watch as many movies as many people do. But, I was using the Die Hard series as an example. And I said,
hey.
How many of you have seen, the Bruce Willis Die Hard series? Nothing. And I said, what? In past years, several people would know. Now, these are first year students, forget about it. And I thought, oh God.
It's not on TikTok.
I need to, yeah, well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
I think it just requires some flexibility on our part. And I kind of get the sense that both of you, and I feel the same way, you kind of embrace the humor of the situation, right? And if you can get the students in on the joke, even better. The example that comes to mind for me is I always like to share the Bob Newhart line from his original TV show, The Bob Newhart Show. Somebody asked him, Bob, what's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? And he said, it's about $40 an hour. So I share that. And then I will ask, well, before I share it, I'll say, do you know who Bob Newhart is? Well, nobody knows who Bob Newhart is. So they haven't seen from the 1970s, the Bob Newhart Show. Well, do you recall he had a show after that was called The Newhart Show, where he was an innkeeper, and it was Daryl and his other brother, Daryl. Well, no, they don't remember that. So what I've gone to is, do you remember the movie Elf with Will Ferrell?
Right.
Do you remember his adoptive father at the North Pole? That was Bob Newhart. And that seems to work. And I kind of enjoy taking the students on that journey about who Bob Newhart was.
You left out Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, Professor.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I should mention that.
Even now, my students are not familiar with Big Bang Theory.
Oh, come on.
Well, honestly, I mean, I can make a reference to something about Sheldon. They don't know what I'm talking about.
Wow.
Well, that's a major cultural deficit that I feel needs to be remedied. And I hope that does not sound condescending, by the way, but that needs to be remedied.
Oh, that's so funny.
So let me ask you one more question as we sort of get toward wrapping up this episode. What advice would you have to your younger faculty colleagues about anything about their careers, about how to be successful in their careers? And I'm thinking, Dana, about our faculty colleagues who perhaps would be receptive to our advice to them. If you could talk to your younger self, another way of thinking about it is, what do you wish your younger self had known that would have been helpful as you went through your career?
Well, I was thinking about something that, we have sort of an orientation every fall, and sometimes I get invited, and this is for new faculty. And one of the things I'll say to them is, look, I don't know what your long-term plans are, I'll say, this is a really nice place, but you have to be able to leave. And if you can't leave, that's a problem. And what I mean is, you need to produce a corpus of work that will allow you to move if the wolf comes at the door and or at the university's door, or if enrollment is down, because, last in, first out. And I mean, no one said that to me, but I remember thinking I decided on my own that I needed to produce so that if I ever needed to get another job, I could. But, one of the things I think is so strange is now that I don't think, and I may be wrong about this, and you two can correct me, but I get a feeling that recent hires, whether they're tenure track or non-tenure track, they don't see this as an opportunity the way we did. I mean, it's a job, and if this doesn't work out, I'll do something else. And maybe that's a good attitude. I don't know, but I do think, slingshotting back to work-life balance issues, I think a lot of them want much more. They want a firm boundary between those two things, and mine has always been porous, unfortunately. But so I don't know. Maybe that's it.
I worked with some young faculty who said, I want a very clear boundary line between my professional relationships with colleagues and my friends, which I've always thought is a little bit odd.
Yeah.
That seems unfortunate to me.
Yeah, it makes for a very chilly environment to have that stated explicitly. I would add that advice to young Jane starting out. I actually got advice that helped me, which was a mentor said to me in the middle of my first year, there's no way not to have a first year. I'm like, oh, there's a reason that this is so damned hard. It's really hard. And fortunately, because I had good mentoring all the way through my career, hats off to Bill McKeechee, among others, the worst year is the second year, when your head is finally up. You can kind of like look up from your skis and see the environment, and you have to decide, is this the environment that you want to grow old in? For me, I stayed at one institution for 17 years and then decided this isn't the environment that I want to finish in. I need something different. And my mentor said to me, that you reach an age in an environment sometimes where you've done everything interesting and you become pluckable. And so I use that phrase a lot when I'm trying to recruit people in hiring situations. Are you pluckable? Are you getting a little bored doing the same old thing? Would you like a new pond to play in? And recognizing that wherever you go, you end up creating an academic family. I have 3 academic families that I stay in touch with. I think that makes for a very fulfilling life. And it would have been nice to have a heads up about how rich the relationships would be in my future. Starting out, you're just so focused on being 2 weeks ahead of your students that you don't tend to think more long-term about quality of life issues and work-life balance. And I do think younger faculty arrive better attuned to work-life balance than I certainly did.
Oh, yeah. But Jane, you said something a few minutes ago that resonated with the recent experience of a friend of mine. So this friend left for another institution and moved up into administration. And she was really excited. And I know the institution, and it's really terrific. And it's a perfect position for her. And I don't want to provide real life details because of what I'm going to say next. But when she got there and she's working with a new provost and another associate provost, she was told very directly that this is the kind of institution where administrators do not fraternize with faculty. And so even though she has an appointment in a department, and this is a person who likes to entertain and she can't
Uh-huh.
And I just thought, that doesn't seem right to me. That, you want to have an impact on the place where you're working, but you also want to have friends there.
Right.
And this is more like the admonition, for faculty, like with students, be friendly, not friends. And I don't think I couldn't negotiate that. I couldn't live that way. But maybe this is another one of I don't think this is the true at most places or many places, maybe.
Actually, I think there are presses that suggest you don't want to fraternize because you're going to be seen as having favorites. I did face that in both moves that I made that were administrative. And you either ignore it, like, well, I need social connections, and so I'm going to have friendships and I'll deal with the fallout, or you figure out other ways to get social connections beyond the university.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've often thought, sort of going along with this theme, as teachers of psychology, if we're not having fun in our jobs, I think we're not doing it right. If we're not enjoying it.
Agreed. You have to be pretty bad to have a boring psychology class.
Yeah.
Well, that maybe is a happy note to end on. So let's wind up there. It really has been a pleasure talking with the two of you. And I do hope that people will listen to this, including perhaps some of our junior colleagues, and I'm sure that they will find some nuggets of wisdom. So thank you both for participating today. This has been great.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is great.
I love you both.
Love you both too.
Same here. A pleasure. Take care.
Bye.